I'm going to throw it over to you, Dr. Jill. As I don't know if you saw it before,
Yes,
very
I
proudly wearing
did.
my shirt. It truly, and this isn't pie in the sky BS. The idea of hope, because you deal, for those, please click her name on the website, learn more about AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, #1 funder in the world in suicide prevention research. And knowing you, Jill, personally and professionally, like, you're just a good person doing a lot of great work. Is your organization. I'd love for you to just hear any key takeaways from Lauren, and if you have a question or two for her. So I'll throw it over to you.
Sure. Well, I have to say I'm in total awe of you. I respect you, and I wonder about you're amazing, and I'm a little afraid. So just to say, I have total awe for you. And I very much enjoyed your presentation, and it reminded me of two things. One is some of the organizational and group work through the Tavistock group, where they talk about 4 important ingredients. And Doctors Green and Mellencamp spelled it out in what they call the BARD model. So it has to do with boundary, authority, role, and task. And a lot of what you were talking about was the development and maintenance and flexibility of boundaries, and that everybody knows who's in charge for what. That's the authority part. And then everybody has a role, actually probably more than one role. And they have a role in the task. But one of the tasks that it seems like the astronauts have to do is get along and live together. And that not just work together and be a team, but be a little in awe of each other and respectful. And well, I have my 4 keywords. I don't know what your keywords are for life, but I've recently come to mind, which are compassion, respect, patience, and persistence. And I hear that in what you're saying. So I think about in group relations, you talk about large groups, small groups, intergroup events, which we all do every day in our life, right? Some groups we're a part of, some groups we're not a part of, and really knowing your boundaries, authority, role, and task in those situations. So if I get on the subway, I don't have any role but to stay out of people's ways. And I don't have any authority. I swipe my card, I get on the subway, and wherever it goes, I'll get there when I get there. And everybody on the subway acts that way, even though we don't know each other, or almost everybody. So I think about the workings of group relations, that it's a balance between what individuals bring to the group, and yet at the same time, the group has is kind of like an entity unto itself. So that's one of the things that I thought about, which of course I could go on forever, but I won't. The other is a sports analogy. And really, everything you're saying happens for every team, which is that you have often a stressful environment. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of each other. And the sports analogy is all this practice that you go through to make it work. And in sports, they call that muscle memory, right? So that the third base person throws to the first base person over and over and over and over again. Not because they're terribly interested in doing that, but because eventually they won't have to think about it, and they'll just know what to do. And it seems like all the practice and the physical experiences are developing that kind of muscle memories. So when you're in that stressful environment, you don't have to think about the little things. I have to pull my arm back. I have to put my arm forward, and you can really focus on what the task is at the time. So those are the 2 analogies that I thought of. And then the statistician in me is, what you're doing, Jeff is smiling, is you're trying to control what we call random error, right? That you're trying to make sure that as much of the things that you can account for, you account for, knowing that there will be random error, that things will happen. And so it sounds like you're picking people who can do their job well, but have the flexibility and resilience to bounce back when things don't actually work out that way, which in life, that's part of life, right? We plan and plan and plan. There are still going to be some things that don't work out. So I think of these teams, the team on the ground, the team in space, the team that goes out is different from the team that when they're all in the spaceship together. And that flexibility, but clarity of boundaries is very, very complex. There's just, so much going on. And for me, being a researcher and therapist and hearing you talk about it, at one level, it's a whole new world. I have no idea what you're talking about. But at the other level, I can understand because I work in teams and I work in groups and so I think that's the balance that we're all trying to achieve in life, in work, in family. And it's such a great example and metaphor for what we're all managing and trying to do the best that we can without knowing exactly what's going to happen at any given moment. So I said a lot. I don't know if there are specific questions or thoughts, but I'll stop there.
I'll jump in real quick because we had a question submitted through the Q&A, and I'll throw it to you, obviously, Lauren, first, and then Jill, if you have thoughts and comments on it as well. So I'll read the question out loud. They said, the Navy SEALs have concluded that trust is more important than performance. They believe that a medium performer with high trust is much better for a team than a high performer with medium trust. Do you take that under account when selecting team members? How do you balance that? That was a pretty good question. And before you answer that, I just want to pointlessly say, Jill, all those people walking by, boy, are they missing out, but they can watch the recording. Let them know that it's being recorded.
Yes. That's what happens with glass walls, people in glass houses kind of thing.
Lauren, I'll throw that to you. I can repeat it if you need me to.
No. It really comes down to team orientation that we focus on during selection. So in the past few selection cycles with astronauts, they've specifically started targeting that factor. And so you'll see it in the new classes. They're incredibly team-oriented folks. And so they're ready to sacrifice for each other, to sacrifice for the greater goals of the mission. And so when you have the people on board that are going to do the right thing and work together to achieve what you guys all want to achieve and achieve that mission, that's where the trust comes in. And I think that's an incredibly interesting comment. The Navy SEALs went after that as well, because you want that cohesiveness, and then cohesiveness will breed better performance. And so it helps itself out too.
I don't know, Jill, did you want to add anything?
Well, I'm thinking about trust and what is trust. And trust is really more on an internal thing of what you expect and bring to a situation, as well as a social thing about what somebody else brings. And trust and expectation, I think, are very mixed. You don't have to like a person to trust them. And it can be viewed as a bond. And I guess what I was thinking is it's really important to realize there will be at least little breaches of trust along the way. And it's the reparation of that trust or the maintenance of that despite imperfection. And I think that's where you talked about humility. I think that's where humility comes in, that none of us are perfect. So I trust you, but you're going to do some things that I don't like or I don't feel comfortable with. And I can either feel hurt about it and pull back, or I can accept that that's part of the process of being human and being together. So there is a strong internal process to trust.
Yeah. So it was something I'm thinking, given your background, Jill, right, in not just overseeing the funding of research, but participating in conducting it yourself. And Lauren, same thing with you. And why one of the things that draws me to working at Columbia is the idea of the term called translational research, doing research for the purpose of affecting and impacting people directly. And as I tackle that idea with both of your work, and I'll throw it to you, Lauren, and Jill, I'd love to hear what you think as well, is it's that idea, though, is when you're measuring it and doing the research, it's human beings. But then also human beings can say they're a good team player. They could do really good on your tests or what have you, your measurement scales. But then I would imagine, and I know we have Sarah coming on, I think it's later this afternoon or tomorrow, talking more about the analogs. And for what everybody, for your understanding, these analogs that she was showing the photos they do these experiments basically on Earth for the most part, and they put people together to see how they live and work in environments that are supposed to be it's close to as identical as like the trip to Mars or what have you. And I just wonder how do you measure whether or not the people getting along or learning, like you said, and you said it earlier too, like I know from some of your research reading the journals, or the third quarter lag you expected. So how what I wrote down, you try to predict it, prevent it, and repair it. And I don't know, I'm just going to say something and put a question mark at the end. It's really, really hard. And especially that's for people that don't realize that it's your job, and the pressure that's on you, even though ultimately it's up to the astronauts, it's your job to try to do those three things. So I don't know, how do you do it, and how do you keep trying to address it?
Yeah. So right now we do a lot of surveying. We ask them about the cohesion amongst their teammates. We ask them if there's any conflict going on. We ask them about the team processes, like, are you able to be psychologically safe and take risks and offer new ideas and not get slapped down for it on your team? We're trying to shift into ways of doing that more unobtrusively. So instead of surveying them to death, can we listen to what they're saying, have an algorithm operating in the background that analyzes the semantics and the lexical analysis, and then can offer up like, hey, this team is cohesive or not very cohesive, you need an intervention. And so we're trying to move into not asking them directly, because sometimes maybe people can figure out how to fake that or present the way that they want to. I will say for the analogs that we operate in, they're pretty upfront about everything. So that's good. And when we marry the survey data with other ways of analyzing data, like analyzing what they're saying, we can see kind of the overlap there. So that's good. So we're hoping to move more into that unobtrusive measurement space for sure.
Great. And Jill, I was just thinking if there's a tie into I think about in some of the stuff I'm involved with, the suicide prevention work and trying to identify the behaviors, but then the interventions can't just look good published in a research journal. They actually have to be practiced and embraced.
That's
And
right.
yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that with what Lauren said as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about the importance of motivation and of external consultation. That in most situations, you don't have to do it yourself. You have somebody who's in therapy, we say a participant observer, who isn't playing a role in the person's life, but looking at it and saying, gee, I think this is happening. What do you think? So that having that outside observer, which I think is part of what Lauren is talking about, but it also depends on the motivation, both internally and the motivation of the group, to keep working towards that conflict resolution and that sort of almost like a steady state of being able to work together. And everybody on board has to be motivated to maintain that and to want to work towards that, knowing that it's an imperfect process. With regard to treatments and things like that, it's very interesting to me. First of all, we've had treatments that look good and people started doing them, but they don't work. So in suicide, that's like contracting for safety. It's like, promise me you won't kill yourself. Well, that's not how the brain works. And you can't promise that you're not going to do something, because in suicide, there is a certain crisis state that happens where the person loses access to their usual coping. So they could promise you, but that doesn't mean they can carry it out. But we've learned that helping people plan in advance, which is something we're talking about, using something like a safety plan and planning out, if I start to go down that pathway, what are some things I can do to head it off at the pass and to not act on it, to create a safe environment? Who can I reach out to? Because I won't be thinking that well at the time. So that works. Promise me you won't kill yourself doesn't work. And so that's where that's why we have research to test out these things and see if they're working, and to learn about what components are working, so that we don't have like a 10 component treatment when it turns out you only need the first two. But I'm always amazed, I'm lucky that I have this unusual view of suicide research. I'm amazed that there's all this work going on in brains and understanding the brain and how it works in suicide. And then there's the treatments, and they don't always inform each other, but in the end, they are working on the same processes. We learn from studying the brain that people have difficulty with decision making and weighing out rewards and all this stuff. And the therapies, which didn't really necessarily rely on brain studies, help people to process things, to make better decisions, so there is some synergy between treatment and all forms of underlying research that happens in the process of all of us caring about suicide prevention.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill.